In terms of process with Mametz, because it's that event in our history, there's a lot of facts to explore, and it's a mammoth of a play. Like there's so much to get through, and it's so dense, and there's so much depth to it. The first week was spent very much looking at the text, sat in a circle, going through the text, making sure that we factually know where we are, what's happened, what's next, and exploring character. So we start to kind of pick up those questions about who these people are, why they're there, what they're doing. And I think that's especially important with the 4 boys who are there and with the 3 girls who are there, because they are fictional characters who they need to be explored, and they need to be made three-dimensional and understand their choices and why they're there and their situation.
Just because you've cheated Death once, Bach, don't mean you can cheat him again. But he wouldn't listen. None of them do.
She means the explosion. Universal colliery. Syngenydd disaster. 440 men and boys. My dad, my brother, but not me.
The actors bring a lot to that. The director provokes those questions, asks those questions, and then it's up to the actor to kind of start to answer them within the vision over the next 4 weeks. So having done that, trawled through it, and made sure that we all know where we are and explored character and story, it's then looking at it visually. Where are they and where is everyone placed? Kind of geographically, where people are, what space means what. And again, in the staging of Mametz, it was really a big part of the process was looking at how much these worlds can bleed over. So really playing with having a scene happening there, but then what happens when you do bring in the girls in the house.
Dear sir, I am the wife of one of your soldiers, Private Ellis Jones, and I have a request which I hope you will be able to grant.
And then movement. There was a lot of movement in the process of Mametz. So the sequence in the cafe when they enter that first van, there was a lot of time spent on getting that to a place where it was perfect and it was rigorous. And that was created through kind of improvisation. So all the actors bring so much to stuff like movement, which is then up to the director and the movement director to kind of play with and mould and really explore. So week 4 we ended up going on site. And by this point, characters are very much reaching those final stages. Staging wise, we know where we are. But there was a lot of work on that final week of looking at the site and how what we'd done in the rehearsal room then transferred into that barn and into the woods and into that no man's land.
Move forward, hold the line.
One of the challenges when it comes to doing a piece about an event in our history is to get away from that real factual telling. Which I don't think Owen's done actually in the play, but it is a danger that you slip into almost a lecture. And what Matthew really did was bring it away from that with the movement and with music and with action that happens above and below and on top of and on side of any of that stuff. Movement actually really helped with the production. When we get to the woods in the end, and I think it's Act 3, Scene 3, when you have the boys having gone into battle and died, and the way that Matthew and Chris, who was the movement director, went at that was rather than it just being a telling of what happened to them and a monologue essentially, they placed it in a heightened kind of battle, really. We created a whole movement sequence to go side by side with it or among it. So from those monologues where they're discussing or describing what happened to them during the battle, we picked out a few words or a few images and made kind of a movement sequence to go with them.
So she went home without knowing where I died.
Only those with no children should be sent to war.
And then you start to explore that movement sequence. So say you have X amount of movements and you start to play with the pace or with the repetition and all of that. all of those elements to it. And then we place them all in one space, and then you have these monologues over it. And what you end up with is these boys describing what's happened to them, the interaction with the females who they have at home, among this organised chaos and visual exploration of that battlefield. That it all just kind of washes over an audience, the whole movement, the words and the music all kind of comes together. So it's not just a description, it's a living thing that is kind of washing over you. There's a lot of text in there and there's a lot to get across. And what Matthew and Chris and the rest of the team I think did really well was bringing that all to life. And there's examples of that just where if you say have the sitter even talking to an audience, that the rest of the characters are still very much present in that space.
It is not Germans against British at war here, or French against German. It is bodies against gravity.
So I think when you are placing all these worlds in one place and you have all these narratives and these stories developing within one space, it is really important that we know where we're focusing in on. That's in terms of clarity. I think you have to know what you want your audience to hear and what you want your audience to focus on at that time. Everything else is kind of underpinning it, be that through movement, so that the movement is smaller or is slower or is not as heightened, or also it can happen with technical stuff, so that the lighting can really help you pull focus to here rather than here. Even though you have an individual here talking to the audience, you might have 10 soldiers here doing something else. Be that just that they're moving sandbags, but they're doing them really slowly, but they're in a much dimmer light to him. It just focuses it in slightly. It's all about pulling focus, and that happens through text, through singing, through lighting, through movement. It's all up for grabs.